Welcome to the inaugural White Owl podcast. And it's very exciting. And it is the 11/11 portal. And I think this is one of the most wonderful days to launch a podcast. It's all about piercing through the darkness to illuminate the truth and supporting people to live by their own authentic truth. And that can be different for everybody. And I am joined by the Mindful Guide, also known as the guy in a white t-shirt. So I've got to bring you on screen. There you are. Yes.
Yeah.
Do you want to say hello while we're waiting for people to join us?
To your audience. Yeah, and thank you for having me on. I feel very honoured. Yes, privileged. Hopefully I can do it justice.
Oh, of course you can. I have been a big fan of Mark Lockyer. That's your real name.
Yeah.
Ever since I met him when I first moved to Tassie, and he's the mindfulness guru. Do you want to say a little bit more about what you do?
What I do? Well, I mean, I'm like you, I'm a social worker and also a counsellor. And increasingly, as time goes on, I realize the power of mindfulness, that ability to be in the present moment. And I often get surprised by how easy that is to do, but how powerful it is the more we are in the present and the more it seems to open up. I'm trying to find, I was talking to a client today and I was trying to find, there must be a phrase for that where, you give an inch and it gives back so much more. That's what mindfulness does for me, and I think it can do for all of us. And it opens up so many realms. It puts us better in a place. It puts us into a better place of awareness, gets us out of our head, but gets us in touch with so many other things, nature and the world, and a sense of spirituality. It can be quite overwhelming, yeah. And so it'd just be nice to be in that place constantly. But unfortunately, this human element comes along with doubt and fears and worries, and sometimes gets in the way. Yeah, but that's the human condition. I think is learning to manage that and grow from it. I do say to clients, that is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, whatever you want to term that as. It's the suffering, because it's in the suffering, which is a strong word, I know, but it's in the suffering that we learn to grow and expand our awareness and become stronger as humans. Yeah.
I love that, because you and I, we've had our own suffering, and we work with people who are suffering, whether that be trauma in the past or current life situation. And I'm sure a lot of people tuning in feel like they've been through suffering or experiencing it. So a way to cope and not just exist but thrive in the midst of what you call absurd sometimes. We'll get into that, absurdism. But yeah, is to find this technique, which I found as well. I've kind of found it through the path of yoga. But mindfulness, explain how you found mindfulness. What was your first, were you always mindful, Mark?
I think I was without being aware of it, but then I guess we could say that for everybody. Everybody has that ability to be mindful. But when you find the vehicle that works for you, whether it's yoga or whether it's focusing on your breathing or whatever it may be that brings you back to the present moment, we all have that ability to do it. And when you can tap into that and really trust it and use it beyond a strategy for coping with stress, I think it becomes a way of life.
Keep talking.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I lived the early parts of my life as a result of my upbringing, which I guess everybody does, that life experience. And it wasn't the best. It was an abusive background. And that left me feeling very insecure within myself, low self esteem, being diagnosed with depression, which was interesting in itself because when I got a diagnosis of like major depression, it was liberating in a way because I could say, oh, it's not me, it's this biological condition that I've got. So, and that would leave me constantly in a state of self-persecution, I guess you could call it. Things always go wrong for me. It must be my fault. Nothing's ever going to go right. I'm a waste of space. And, it's amazing how I lived that life for the first 30 odd years of my life. And like you attract it, it seems to be what you really believe in, you attract it back, even though I never had that sense. It was just who I was. I was caught up in that world of depression, and that's what was reflected out in my own experiences. And I guess the real turning point for me was in 2007. Of all things, I read. Well, it was a great book. It was the right book at the right time. Timing has so much to do with it. Of course, the universe constantly presents us with lessons. It's a matter of whether we are open and aware of them at the time. And I read a book called The Happiness Trap by Russ Harris, which is very much mindfulness based. I mean, from a psychological therapeutic approach, it's based on acceptance commitment therapy. And so instead of fighting those stories that dominate our lives, in my case, depression, unworthiness, instead of fighting it, you learn to accept it, which doesn't mean giving up or giving in. It simply means, yeah, this has been with me for a long while. And so I learned to accept that and then manage the signs, the symptoms as they arose, often being triggered by life events. And so that's where mindfulness is a big part of acceptance commitment therapy, or ACT, or training, acceptance commitment training, I like to call it. And mindfulness is a big part of it. But increasingly over time, I found myself focusing much more on the mindfulness, the ability to be present. And then from a professional standpoint, the strategies that ACT has helps clients also tap into it. It's like the scaffolding that takes us along.
Yeah. So if somebody is going through a journey of depression or despair or just feeling anxious, what's the first step to becoming more mindful? How do they dive into that pot of gold? What would I know you've got 5 ways to, was it survive? No, what was your your post?
I know,
5 ways.
And luckily I printed it off. I think it was, living a life of freedom, practical insights.
How to live with freedom.
Well, that particular post focused on observe without judgment. That's probably a big part of it. Learning to tap into that side of us that can simply be aware. That's the most powerful thing. I mean, in Western society, we live in our head. We believe our thoughts.
Yes.
And so if we have depressive thoughts or we're conditioned to believe that we're not good enough, that becomes our truth. We are stuck to those words, those thoughts. But when we can understand, as other cultures probably do a lot better than we do in Western countries, that we do have another side of us that can simply observe and be aware of what's going on. When we learn to nurture and grow that awareness side to ourselves, then it separates us from those dominant thoughts and beliefs that play out. So when we separate and can observe them being triggered, it just puts us in a better place to have other options. Do I continue to do this worry and judge myself, as an example, or are there other options for me right now?
So it's watching what you're thinking rather than being hooked in to feel like you are the thoughts. you become the watcher of you having the thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. And it's something we can all do. It does take practice, and the more we do it, the more we nurture that side of ourselves that can become aware, that can notice, that can observe. I've always called it the wise self, because it does feel like just a very wise part of ourselves that just can simply notice. Yeah, it's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
And can be tapped into at any time. Yeah.
So that's the first step, watching and noticing your thoughts and asking yourself, are they serving me? Are they useful? What other questions would you ask yourself as you're watching your thoughts?
Yeah.
Or do you just watch them, just notice them?
Yeah, you definitely can get to a place where you ask yourself, is this serving me well right here, right now? Having that worry, that concern, that anxiety. I think most people would say, I am aware of my thoughts, but I think the awareness comes from being attached to the thoughts. So if people have explored their own thinking and have some dominant beliefs such as I'm unworthy, those two words basically, I'm unworthy, become fundamental to who they are. They're stuck to them, so to speak. But when you can develop that side of you that can simply observe that, you realize that may be a dominant belief that you've gained through life experience, through the way you were treated as a child, through other experiences in life. You start to realize they are just two words, I'm unworthy, and they may dominate. And so from a place of mindfulness, you learn to observe them, but don't do anything else other than observe them. Oh, look, there's another I'm unworthy thought. It's a bit like thank you. So I think the awareness that most people have when they're troubled by their thoughts they are their thoughts. They're aware that they're having those unworthy thoughts, but at the same time, they are one and the same. But when you practice something like mindfulness, which is that ability to get back to the present moment and become more aware of what is going on, you then at the same time become aware that I'm having that unworthy thought, but you're doing it, you're separated from it. So when you're back in the present moment, you can then check in with yourself and say, well, do I continue? Are there any benefits in having that thought at the moment? Or are there some other options that I can choose from? So that's the liberating experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Creating that space. Yes, it's so powerful. It seems so simple, but it's so powerful. It's like the secret.
Yeah. I mean, we just don't live in the present moment. That's the amazing thing when you try mindfulness. We are anxious people are often in the future trying to control things, fix things. How do I make this better? How do I make that go away? What's going to happen? What ifs? All of those sort of things, as if we can get on top of all of that and have all the answers, then life is going to be so much better. And so there's no problem with doing that. It's just that if there isn't an answer to all the what ifs at the moment, and it's negatively affecting the quality of our life right here, right now, then there can be great benefit in saying, well, can I let that go for the moment? And a lot of those concerns I've got, maybe they're going to come up in the near future, but I will address them then when they arise.
Yeah. So not living or staying in the future with your thoughts, or is it also not being in the past?
Yeah. I mean, it's simple to say that, but maybe depression is more about the regrets from the past. If only I could go back and change things. Maybe blaming the self. It was all my fault. I should have done more. And so your mind is regularly in the past. Anxiety tends to be more future focused. If only I could control all of this, control the outcome, then things are going to be so much better. And that brings an important perspective as well. Trying to replace control with manage. So rather than I'm going to control these things that are causing me insecurities. It's more like, well, if I can accept that not everything has an answer at the moment, so if I can learn to manage those symptoms, those thoughts, feelings, beliefs, sensations as they arise, if I can learn to manage them, then you know, it's just easier to do. I mean, there's always the analogy of being in a swimming pool, maybe, and there's one of those beach balls next to you, and it's really annoying you, and you just want to, but you, for some reason, you can't get this thing out of the pool. So, you know, you're going to push it under the water, because if it's under the water, it's going to disappear. But we can probably all visualize the energy that goes into pushing that. You know, if only I can get rid of this thing. That's control. Whereas if we can let it go and go, you know, I don't like the beach ball. I really wish I could get it out of the pool. But, you know, I'm not putting my energy into controlling it. No, you know, it's at the corner of my eye, and every now and then the wind blows it over and it bumps me in the arm. But, you know, I can gently push it away, and I put more of my energy into focus on having fun in the pool. So that perspective is managing versus the other one, which is got to get rid of this.
Yeah. Okay. So managing is being aware of how you're feeling or what you're thinking, but just focusing your attention on something else, or is it also about doing things to express the emotion or change it or regulate it?
Again, that's an interesting perspective. I think when we get triggered by something that is unwanted, or that we've just lost our perspective on the present moment, I'm sure we all have moments like that where you go, God, my mind just sidetracked me. I lost focus of what I was doing in the last couple of minutes or so. Even while you're driving, I mean, that's a classic, isn't it? You've traveled 2Ks down the road, and you're not even aware of what was happening on the way, and suddenly you become aware that you got sidetracked by your mind. So you bring yourself back to the present moment, and you become aware that you were sidetracked. And I think it's less about what do I do about that? Yeah, that first part that's so important is just having the awareness and then sitting in the present moment. I heard a podcast last week. Yeah, it's so true that when you trust that process, the answers will come to you rather than that time and energy. Yeah, rather than the time and the energy that we put into what is the answer? I've got to find the answer. When you can trust being present, the answers do come to you. It's like you clear the way. You know, as that saying goes, or maybe I've modified it a bit, get out of your head so you can get into your life. And if you can trust that process, it's amazing what answers present.
Yeah, I think this is a real pot of gold. We overthink it, don't we? So you're saying if you just become the observer and focus on awareness and being present, getting out of the head, maybe I'd say even coming into your heart or your center or, your body, then the answers will come. You'll know what to do next. The path will light up.
Yeah. And that can be very scary, especially for anxious people. It's like, no, I need to have the answer. You know, if I'm back in the present moment and I practice that, it still doesn't give me the answer. I need to know what to do. But it's like, well, if you can trust this process, you will often see options that you won't see when you are fixated on trying to control and fix things, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, it brings up a lot of things. Brings up a lot of things. I guess, you know, my latest thing just recently is that left brain, right brain approach. Not that I try to be scientific, but there does seem to be enough evidence that the left brain is more that rational problem solving side of us. And the right brain is more creative and holistic and looks at the bigger picture. But it has been said that particularly in the Western world, we live in this left brain more than the right brain. I mean, they both operate at the same time, but we don't incorporate the right brain as much. It's all about what is the answer? How do I find the solution? How do I constantly problem solve? And there's nothing wrong if there are the solutions, but when we don't take the time to tap into our right brain and just stop and step back and look at the big picture, when we don't do that, I think it just leads to more and more stress. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So the right brain is our more creative side. What else would you say about the right side of the brain?
Well, a saying I came across the other day by Ian McAllister was the right brain should be the master and the left brain the servant. So it really is, I've got a problem at the moment, whatever that problem may be, financial, relationship, health, something that's worrying us. Naturally enough, the problem-solving brain steps in, which is an evolutionary thing. There's nothing wrong with that. It's trying to keep us safe. Whenever there's unrest in our lives, we're fearful, we're worried, we're stressed, we're anxious. Our brain will interpret that as, we're not safe, and we've got to get to a place of being safe. And so it will automatically go into problem-solving mode. What is the answer? So it's just doing what it's designed to do. But if you're laboring over it, and again, it's affecting the quality of your life in the present moment, there's so many benefits in letting the right brain be the master. It's almost like the right brain steps in. We're not getting anywhere with this problem solving thing. We're just worrying more. We're more stressed. Let's just chill out a bit, take a step back, look at the bigger picture. Let's do things that get us in contact with other things, like go for a walk in nature, or take some time out and trust that process to explore other options, rather than that left brain which is going, no, what's the answer? Quick, come on, try harder. If you can't find it during the day, I'll wake you up at 2:00 in the morning and we can try and find an answer then.
Yep, that monkey mind that's always trying to find a solution. And we'll just keep on going and going. I was reading that you can have like 80,000 thoughts a day.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it? It's hard to fathom. And it's all designed for survival, to keep us safe,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it doesn't know when to chill out.
Smart, but it needs to take a chill pill occasionally. We're thinking ourselves into big stress balls. So you're saying observe, take a step back, tap into present moment activities such as walking in nature. I think sometimes even doing the dishes mindfully, or what else can we do? Even gazing into a child or a pet's eyes, tactile, anything that brings would you say anything that brings your senses into play in the present?
Yeah, and definitely, and things that are creative, art or music, or something that gives you a sense of joy in the moment, is tapping more into that right brain, and then trusting that process in terms of finding an answer, rather than. I mean, as you know yourself, when you deal with highly stressed people, they stop doing the things that bring them joy. They stop doing their hobbies. They stop looking after themselves because this brain will not let go of the stress or the worry or the concern that they've got.
So return to things that make you feel happy, make you feel connected, give you meaning. Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. Having those, well, from an acceptance commitment training perspective, they're called things that give you vitality. It's good to have a list of those things. And they could even be things that you aren't doing, but you've always wanted to do. I want to learn a new course, or I want to learn tennis, or I want to become a better swimmer, or I'd love to learn art, you know, drawing, sketching, something like that. Having that list of things that you know are good for you, and then being committed to doing those things. You know, the other sorts of
Yeah.
behaviours are suffering. They can give us short-term gains. A big one in Western society, of course, is drinking too much alcohol. You know, which can dull the mind and bring you a bit of joy, but there's a bit of suffering the next day. There's lots of
Yeah.
suffering type behaviours that we can engage in, and there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that. But it's good to have a good list of things that you know are good for you, which can include just stopping for a couple of minutes, a couple of slow,
Mm.
deep breaths, you know, observing the world around you. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. Being instead of doing. What do you do? What are your top 5 mindfulness practices? I mean, things that you do to be in the present moment.
I know gratitude has a lot to do with it. When I wake first thing in the morning, there is that sense of being grateful that I've woken up, you know. And you can even do that when you are worrying. You know, maybe you're going through a difficult period in your life. It's not all about trying to get rid of that. It's accepting that that's playing out at the moment, and it doesn't have that definitive answer because it's not there. It could be a difficult relationship or a work-related problem that doesn't have an immediate solution to it. It could be a health problem, something like that. You can still wake up in the morning, and no doubt that will be the first thing on your mind. And so mindfulness can help us be aware of that. You know, I notice that I'm worried about that concern that I've got, but we're doing it from that place of awareness. And it could be just going, you know, I'm very grateful for the fact that I've woken up, that I can get out of bed, that I can use my arms and my legs if that's the case. You know,
Grateful to
it
be
doesn't have
alive. Mm.
it's great to be alive. Yeah. It doesn't have to be this long list of, oh, I'm really grateful for my partner and my children or my house. I think gratitude is best displayed and easiest to do when it's immediate. Like right here, right now, what have I got to be grateful for? You know, the fact that I've got a roof over my head, that, you know, the electricity's going and I can make a cup of tea or something. Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
gratefulness, gratitude has a lot to do with where I'm at. I think the creative process as well, which I have been guilty of letting go. I mean, I like writing poetry, so when I do wake in the morning, and maybe there's some heaviness, um, I just find putting pen to paper and writing a poem to express what is happening for me is beneficial. Yeah. Um, you know, looking after myself, trying to eat as healthy as I can, exercising, um, being appreciative of my surroundings. I mean, both of us live in, you know, sort of rural locations, so there's plenty to say thank you to. You know, just being in awe of everything. I think, you know, the blackwood trees around me are just magnificent, and taking time to just listen to the birds in the morning, just little things like that. Yeah, other things as well, like in the morning, even if people have a routine and they're going to work, you know, next time you take a shower, really notice yourself taking the shower. I often say to clients, um, I bet you have a routine that you do every day when you wash your body in the shower, whenever that may be. But I bet if I asked you right now, what do you do? Where do you start? People would really have to think about it, you know. So next time you're in the shower, just really appreciate that process and maybe spend a little bit of extra time at the end, 1 minute of just standing there and feeling the water fall off of your body, you know, watching it, all those
Mm.
billions of droplets. So doing little things like that, you know, next time you brush your teeth, really brush your teeth. Again, it would be one of those autopilot things where people brush their teeth, I'm sure, in the same way every day. But if you put someone on the spot and said, which side do you start when you first brush your teeth? You'd have to think about it. So next time you
Mm.
brush, you know, really be mindful about it. Yeah.
Yes. And I like that. There's your ordinary daily activities that can take you into the present moment. You don't need to run off and sit cross-legged on a mountain. You don't need to get up at 5 a.m. and meditate as the sun rises. You can just take ordinary activities in your daily life. Yeah. I remember the other day just walking to work. I decided to do a gratitude practice, and I became so into it that I was thanking the bus driver for taking the people to where they had to go. I was thanking the flowers for blooming. You can really just, wherever you are, just look around. Yeah.
And it's very
simple.
powerful. It can be a real guiding force. If you are present and you are walking to work and there's something you need a solution to, maybe you've got an idea in your head, but you don't know how to achieve that. But you're being mindful and you're walking along, and then you pass some houses and you pass a street and you're looking at the street name, and somehow, because you're aware of the street name, that triggers something in your mind. That's what I can do. You know, you get those little triggers regularly when you are more mindful. Yeah.
Yeah. You have those, what I call aha moments, or glimmers, or synchronicities. Yes. So it's like when you're trying to think of someone's name, you're trying so hard, and then as soon as you just let it go, it comes back. Is it a bit like that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I often do that. Yeah.
Okay. So are there any other ways that people can practice mindfulness? We've got observe. Did you say accept? That's all part of it, isn't it? Accepting.
Yeah.
And gratitude.
Yeah. Yes. And I mean, if we think about it, if you had the supposed perfect life, Western life, you know, like you grew up in a wonderful family, and they were wealthy and money was no concern, and you just didn't have any worries, I think we would be on autopilot and not really appreciate what we've got. You know, it's when you do get those glitches in life that we either become a victim to them, or we go, this is the opportunity to learn and grow. And it may be uncomfortable, but through that awareness and through that ability to manage what is happening and not being overwhelmed by it, that's where we learn. That's where we grow. I guess the difference between a young person and an older person is the older person's just had more experiences in life and hopefully has learned to grow from them. But you know, there's a lot of miserable people out there that don't grow. Yeah.
Well, they're still, perhaps they're not observing their thoughts and they're not aware, so they're still sitting in that abject misery of thinking that they are their thoughts.
Yeah, and holding on to security in terms of what the Western world says. You know, more is better, possessions are good, all of those sort of things. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but when you hold on too tightly to that, you know, are you free? I like that concept of freedom. You know, what does freedom really look like? And I think it is less attachment to material possessions. You know, all that stuff that you've got, can you let it go? You know?
Letting go. So this is coming into non-attachment, or not placing your happiness in things. Yeah.
So I think that's part of my evolution of mindfulness. You know, I wouldn't be the first to say that. Lots of the mystics and the gurus say the same sort of thing, but I think the more you practice being present, and the more aware you are and you tap into, you know, the true sense of who you are, I think it naturally leads to letting go of that stuff that you used to hold on so tightly to, you know, because it defines who I am. I mean, I went through that phase. I would have loved to. There's a period in my life when I would have loved to have owned and driven a red Ferrari, you know. Nowadays,
not the red Ferrari.
I'd be embarrassed. I'd sink down, you know. It's like, because everybody would go, oh, look at that guy, you know. Yeah. Yeah, it's not important now. think, you know. Mm.
So are we touching on spirituality then? So if you're not attached to physical things, what are you attached to? What brings you happiness? Present moment, yes, but what is it? Expand on that.
I think it is a connectedness to everything. The more present you are, the more aware of being present. I mean, what I'm looking at the moment is an office desk here that's got a range of things in front of me, a shelf and a stapler and some books and some pictures on the wall. And even just having that ability to stop and look at all the different colors and the textures and the materials and the way the light shines on them and the shadows. It's like even that little patch just there is overwhelming. It's awe-inspiring. And I guess the connection to spirituality, while I'm thinking about it, is it's all energy. It's all different forms of energy as we are as well. And so we have relationship to everything, you know. I do believe everything has a soul, you know, whatever you want to define a soul as, you know. A rock has a soul. It's made up of energy that keeps it together in a certain way. So we are connected to everything, which in its own way is that sense of spirituality. You know, I don't operate as an island. I'm connected to everything. And it just seems that if we show everything kindness and compassion and love, the world just seems to operate in a better way. Yeah.
Oh, I like some things you said there. So even a rock has a soul. Everything's energy. Yes. I know a lot of people listening to this might struggle to think a rock has a soul, but I definitely feel that everything's vibrating and everything has energy and everything's connected.
Yeah. That's not hard to. That makes perfect sense. You know, a left brain scientist will tell you the makeup of a rock and why it is so dense and so hard. It's the way the atoms are bond together and the energy that's associated with that. Yeah, I mean, we're all energy. Yes, so that can be a sense of spirituality, that we are all connected. And then I think with mindfulness, it's also that understanding, which I'm coming to terms with more and more. It's just so amazingly powerful. There are the answers there. Amazing things can happen to you when you tap into that energy source, that connectedness, you know?
Yeah, connectedness. And it's like the panacea to loneliness, isn't it? Because a lot of us have gone through periods of feeling disconnected, lonely. But when you expand into that mindfulness and being aware of your connection even to trees, rocks, you don't necessarily have to be even though it's healthy to be with people, you can also feel connected to nature. I know you've done a little bit of studying of Shinrin Yoku. Did I say it right?
Yeah, Shinrin Yoku. I should do more of it, Mel. Yes, yes. Which is that Japanese. That's a Japanese mindfulness technique, you could say, where, you know, you go out in nature. And when I first did that course, you realize people love going to the park or something like that, but they're often zooming through. You know, they're walking really fast, talking to people or on their phone, and have some sort of sense that they are amongst nature, but they're not necessarily taking it in. Whereas something like Shinrin, no, they're not present. Shinrin Yoku could easily just pick a small patch of land, say in a park, and you do a lot of discovery. You know, you look at the trees, you look at the bark, you look at the grass, you take it all in, you take in the smells, the textures. So you are really present in that moment. So that's like getting amongst nature and practicing mindfulness there, you know? Yeah. And if you do it in a traditional Japanese way, you always end with a small tea party at the end. Yeah.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, I wanted to ask you about, because you've also talked to me and written about absurdism, which I know many people are aware of mindfulness, but maybe just not so much of absurdism. And that's a way that you use to enjoy life more. So tell me a bit more about absurdism.
So I guess it's got links to, they're all sort of interconnected at some level. Absurdism is a philosophy that has been attributed to a French Algerian called Albert Camus, or, Australians would say Albert Camus, Albert Camus, who was around in the, 40s and 50s. And well, I mean, really, what he says is life is absurd. I mean, it sounds a bit harsh, but life is absurd. The world really couldn't give two hoots to us. Whether we're here or whether we're not. Um, if you decide to go to Antarctica and go for a 2 kilometer walk naked, you're probably going to freeze to death. The it,
Yeah.
it you know the universe isn't just going to suddenly change and it's going to heat up or something like that. I mean, a miracle may happen, yeah, for sure, that somebody finds you. But yeah, basically, I sum it up by saying, good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people. And often things happen and it makes no sense. If you don't mind me saying, you've had a sister that passed away under awful circumstances. Julie, my wife, had a sister that died horribly. It made no sense the way that
Yes.
she died. And if you're just constantly trying to find meaning, you can often end up torturing yourself. So it was a bit like, look, don't try and make sense of it. These things happen in life. It's not being flippant or dismissive about it. It's just an acceptance that these things do happen. So we're better spent with our energy in the present moment, being of service to others, finding joy in life, and as Albert Camus said, it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea or drink, get drunk and argue with the lamppost, just really, really appreciate life and find freedom, freedom.
Freedom. Yeah, and it definitely has felt like an absurd world recently, the last 4 years. And sometimes I like to find meaning. I do, but I like that there's also the option to just go, well, nothing makes sense and it doesn't matter. Or maybe one day we'll know why it all happened, but we don't need to figure it all out now. And that provides freedom because you can just let go. You can not hold on to your beliefs so tightly. You can leave space for other people to have their beliefs. So I I'm warming up to this idea of absurdism.
Because that also leads me into a common phrase that I say nowadays, which is, I don't know. I mean, what do we really know? Like if someone says, I know this to be true, I do like asking, do you absolutely positively know that to be true? And really, if you investigate yourself, there's very little that we absolutely know to be true,
Yeah.
It doesn't mean don't hold on to anything. It just means hold on to everything lightly, I think. Look at the recent American elections. I've even had a couple of clients, one guy was from America. He was thinking of going back to America and he was saying, I'm not going back there. I'm never going back there again. All those bunch of idiots that voted for Trump, it's like he held on so tightly to this, and my answer to that is, I don't know, I mean, it doesn't matter who gets in, something's going to happen, I guess. But I'm not going to be so adamant about what I know to be true,
Yeah. So it's the other word that comes to mind. It's surrendering to what is without having to have all the answers, and finding your bliss and your passion in connection in the present moment, whether that is patting your cat or maybe you derive pleasure out of following politics and getting excited about that. But if someone else doesn't have your viewpoint, let them have their pleasure. Yeah. Okay. I like absurdism. Would you also say that it's about holding lightly, and also it's this idea that eventually life ends? Like I'm a yoga teacher as well as a mental health social worker, and I love the death meditation. We kind of do it at the end of every yoga class. We go into the corpse pose and we just surrender our body. Even in the real, death meditation, you imagine it rotting and all the flesh disappearing and all the people you love and all the possessions just gone. So I get a lot of comfort out of just saying, eventually we all die. What do you think of that?
I mean, that would be part of the Stoic tradition as well. Stoics, Marcus Aurelius and those other Stoics that, how do you word it? They hold on lightly to mortality, but it is that sense that I might die today, but it's not a morbid attachment to that.
No, it's not morbid.
It's just saying, I may die today. So it's almost like preparing for anything that can happen today, so that if it does happen, you were sort of prepared for it. So it takes a lot of the fear out of it. And it sounds like that's what you do with that meditation at the end. It's like, I'm not so afraid of dying. I mean, I can accept that I'm going to die and lose everything. And that's a similar, mindfulness again, isn't it? It's turning around and embracing this thing that often we're so fearful of. If I just step back a bit, open up to it, make room for it, then often the fear will dissipate. It will be less. Yeah.
Yeah. And also in that moment of knowing that your physicality will die, there's also a sense that your soul that connects everything doesn't die. So there's this dual realization that this life ends, but I don't end.
Yeah. Even Albert Einstein would agree with that, wouldn't he? The conservation of energy. Energy doesn't die, it changes. So when our body physically dies, that energy that held it all together and made it up just changes, it goes out into the ether. Yeah. So
yeah,
definitely.
So there we go. We've covered the present moment to death, and it's all great. We're just going to surrender to it all. But I do feel that there's just so much wisdom. So where can people hear more of your amazing wisdom, Mark?
Okay. All right. I noticed that I'm feeling embarrassed. I noticed that, I'm doing a bit of mindfulness. I mean, I've got a website. marklockyer.com, marklockyer.com. I do a lot of blogging on that. I've got Instagram, guy in a white t-shirt, all one word, guy in a white t-shirt. Facebook, and as you know, I got hacked and I've just never got Facebook back. So, but I've got a new page now called The Mindful Guide. Yeah, I posted that as well. So, if people are interested, they can follow. Yeah, I really would like to get some courses going. I've got an ebook if you go to my webpage, marklockyer.com, that people can download for free.
A free ebook. Well, I'll put a link to that. What's that ebook about?
It's about, really, it's about acceptance commitment therapy. But, my simplified version of it. and how people can incorporate it into their life through practical means. You know, it helps people discover their stories. Now, I couch our issues as a story that probably is made up of many chapters, which is not a bad way of looking at it. So rather than being consumed by, you know, I'm hopeless, nothing ever goes right for me, maybe it's called the hopeless story. So it feels like you're holding a book called the hopeless story by me. And when we do get overwhelmed, we've pulled this thing right into our face and nothing ever works for me. I'm hopeless and no one likes me and, you know, an imposter and nothing will ever go right for me. And when it's right up against us and we're fully immersed in the story and we're stressed and worried and fearful and anxious, you know, we forget that we've got a body, that there's an outside world. So we totally get consumed by it. And then we can spend a lot of time pushing this story out. I don't want it anymore. You know, when you push it out far, your view of the world is much greater, but you're putting so much energy into trying to control it, fix it, make this thing go away. What's the answer? Whereas, you know, the third option is about acceptance, where that title comes from, acceptance commitment therapy. What if I can learn to accept this story that doesn't have an immediate solution? Then my energy goes into managing it. So I can put the book in my lap. Now my hands are free to be creative and embrace the ones that I love. My view of the world is much greater in terms of options. And so my energy goes into when I'm triggered, when that story starts to rise up. And so there's some practical ways of being able to do that through mindfulness activities. Yeah.
Okay. So the ebook guides people through that process of acceptance. And space between their story.
Yeah, the story comes along with me. It always has, because it, you know, I've been shaped by it throughout my entire life. Whatever anyone's story is, the anxiety story, the depression story, the I'm hopeless story, the I'm unlovable story. You know, whatever it may be, you can give it a title. It goes with you wherever you go. It doesn't mean you're debilitated by it every day, but you're going to be triggered every now and then. And so this approach has some strategies to be able to manage it and grow from the experience. Yeah.
That's a beautiful gift. Okay, I'll definitely put a link for people, or you can go and find it at, is it marklockyer.com? You'll find that ebook.
Yep.
Have you put a link to it in your your Instagram? Is there a link to it on your Instagram? Guy in a white t-shirt.
There's a link to the Mark Lockyer website. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Oh, I've loved this conversation, and you're my first guest. So thank you so much. And I think this is the perfect place to start when we begin to pierce through the darkness and find our truth, is to start by being present, being mindful, being aware, and then accepting what we find. And I would add, with great compassion.
Kindness and compassion to self, you know, so hard to do in our Western society, isn't it? You know?
Yeah.
We'll give ourselves a big hug.
Big hug. Yes, I love it. Thank you so much, and many blessings and so much gratitude. I'm so happy that you are my guest and that you are my friend, and that I have the privilege to know you and learn from you.
You do my confidence no end of good. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So if anyone has any questions, type them in the chat. I'm sure I can, Mark can pop on Facebook and answer them, or you can find him at... Keep the conversation going in the comments, please. We love to hear from you. Or visit Mark at Guy in a White T-shirt on Instagram, or The Mindful Guide on Facebook, or marklockyer.com. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, have a pleasant evening. And I don't have a tagline. So it's just
hoot,
goodbye. I
hoot.
have to work on that. Hoot, hoot. Okay. Yeah. Hoot, hoot.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks, Mel.
all right. Thank you.